Welcome to the About Sex podcast. I'm Joshua Skirtu, and with me as always is our resident sex therapist, Angela Skirtu. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Josh.
And who's with us today?
Today, Jaimie Hilemann is with us. She is a trans and LGBTQIA plus cultural competency educator and diversity and inclusion consultant, executive director of TES, the Trans Education Service. And just a quick bio for you. After 24 years in the corporate world, from key account sales, sales training to sales management, Jaimie felt the need as a trans woman to advocate and speak out for trans and LGBTQAI plus issues. I like doing it just like that. I think it's fun. First volunteering with MTUG, Metro Trans Umbrella Group in St. Louis, she eventually became board president and still collaborates with MTUG today. Aware of the rapidly changing needs in the trans community, she began consulting as a transcultural competency educator. And then extra things that maybe you might want to speak to are DAP, TES, LLC.
We don't need to go into all that.
We'll get to WPAT, GEA, GEI,
Okay.
and all of those
Nobody
important
knows
things
what all those
soon.
acronyms are, but we'll
They're
get to those.
important to us, but we'll get
through
to them.
Sounds good. So first of all, we're going to talk about Roy Moore.
Yeah.
Which...
Get into today's topic that's popular.
Recently, this man was accused by multiple women of sexually assaulting or harassing them. Mm-hmm. And most of them were underage when it happened. Like, a lot of them were 17 and 14-year-old girls. Okay. And so that's been in the air a lot right now. And all of a sudden, the election comes up, and he doesn't drop out. Everybody's like, you should drop out. But our president says, no.
Your president? So I don't know all of the steps to this story.
Yeah,
so the president's like, no, you're fine.
The president of the United States is like, no. You stay in. It's okay. Like, their mindset is, even if it's a pedophile, even if this person is a pedophile, as long as he's not a Democrat, they're okay with it.
What?
Really? That is 100% their mindset, is that pedophiles go here. They're the worst of the worst, but Democrats are even under that.
Jaimie, what are your thoughts on this case? And by the way, feel free to cut in anytime. We really just break in and banter. Oh, yeah. So don't ever feel like you have to wait to speak.
Yeah, because you'll never get that chance.
You'll never get that chance. So what are your thoughts about this?
You mentioned the person currently occupying the White House.
Yeah. Trump.
I sense a little disdain in your voice.
Really? I thought I was moderating that better.
Well, she did at least call him a person.
Yeah, she did call him a person.
And that's more than a lot of people do.
That's pretty humane of you.
Yeah,
definitely.
he's not Pumpkin Hitler or something. So there you go.
Continue.
So it's interesting that you know he only came out and openly supported Roy Moore's candidacy last week, after Al Franken's revelation came about. Because with that, I think a lot of people, including the RNC, assume, well, this will take the pressure off of Roy, and it won't be a Republican issue. Oh, well, it's an everybody issue now. And so the RNC turned Moore's funding back on because
because
if
everybody's doing it, why wouldn't we
the president
elect him?
told them, send him money. We need to make sure.
Because they want a lot of Republicans in office.
Right.
That's a part of it.
They feel like the pedophiles are a big demographic for them. So they really want to make sure to get all the pedophiles down in the South to really, really stay on board with the Republican Party. They don't want to lose them to the Green Party, you know?
Oh, no, I agree with that. That makes
You're
sense.
killing me.
Oh my gosh.
So there's that. And then it was just astonishing, that the guy who had completely supported Roy Moore's opponent, Luther Strange, in the primary, and who is currently temporarily occupying the seat, suddenly comes on board last week, full guns ahead, and that's when people, I think, in Alabama realize these are our choices. They've had not quite 2 weeks to think about it, and friends I have in Alabama, who are more liberal, say that they didn't expect to come down to this either. They really didn't.
Yeah, it's an insane world where everything goes, it seems now.
Well, I think I felt the same way about the presidency. I mean, I assumed that when he said you could just grab people's pussies, we do try to keep it PG, but that is what he said.
If the president says it's G.
It's G,
That's
apparently.
That's a G word now. It's
and
said on the news.
Surely that would turn people off from this person, but somehow he still ended up elected. So, like, where's this country going?
I don't know. And with this election, he actually only lost by 1.5%. That means half of the people in Alabama who voted for this person, they voted for him. Like, who are they? Who are these
I think
people?
there are some people who are really strongly connected to their party, regardless of anything about the person. What are your thoughts, though?
I think they also don't
Jaimie
read.
wants to say something here.
Go for it.
I think it's even more entrenched than party politics.
Okay.
Because a lot of the folks interviewed self-describe. This is both before the election and in the exit polling. Mm-hmm. They self-describe as evangelical Christians, and for them, there are two priorities, and that's having a Republican-dominated Senate. So when the Senate rules change, the simple majority can now approve a Supreme Court nominee. Mm-hmm. So if that happens, with Moore, if Moore had been in Washington, then it would guarantee that they would get another SCOTUS pick in who was radically anti-abortion rights. So that's for a whole big chunk of the Alabama electorate. It was about abortion.
And a lot of them said that same thing about, like, Trump. Like, they were like, we're going to vote for him just because we think he's going to go for the abortion rights, no matter how terrible of a person he is in any other arena.
Yeah, so they're very strongly pro-life, and then the second thing is?
The second thing is they absolutely detest same-gender marriage. They detest LGBT marriage rights, LGBT
people,
legal recognition, LGBT people.
People, yeah.
Yeah, just people.
So they want to roll back Roe v. Wade, and they want to roll back Obergefell versus Hodges.
They want their rights back to hate. They want them back.
Sad.
They want to take them back. That's it.
sad, but that's kind of true.
That's the
I
truth.
mean, like...
They want to take it back to the olden times. Back in the olden days, we got to do everything hateful.
Yeah,
and no
and it was
repercussions.
normalized, and that's not okay.
Yeah, and that's what they want.
As if, equality and civil rights were a zero-sum proposition, and if LGBT people, if we gain it, then suddenly they lose something. But that's actually not true at all.
No. Yeah, they're just weird. That's people.
I always feel
Angela
this
seems
way after
really
that. While I appreciate that we're doing this as
Like,
a
it
part
sounds
of the
like you
sex
just heard this
podcast.
news.
No, it's not that I just heard it. But, like, I have this way of, like, really taking information on. This is probably why I'm a therapist. Because I can just get lost in these emotions. And I'm just like, the horror of life. I just don't want people to do that. I want inclusivity. I want people to love and have empathy. And I think... for me, this goes back to, like, I think from birth and from childhood, people need to be trained to have deep empathy and understand how they're impacting people so that there can be more inclusivity and respect for persons. It doesn't matter, like, if you have different values or beliefs, that's fine, but you don't get to use your values to, like, guide how people live.
Public policy.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't appreciate that connection.
Yeah. If you want to believe something, go for it.
Believe
I
Have
don't
your
believe
beliefs.
in
Just
unicorns.
Keep them to yourself.
But the unicorn... Your belief in unicorns does not change the fact that you can't have unicorns in the White House.
What?
It's not going to happen.
Where did you just go?
It's belief.
Jaimie's got something to
No,
say
I'm being
here.
super silly.
An analogy that I kind of like is the liberal
Use unicorns.
says, I want the freedom to live my life as I see it without harming others.
Right.
And the conservative says, I want the freedom to tell you how to live your life the way I think you should.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that points to, I think, what's important as far as laws go, is that I think laws should be to protect us from hurting each other.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it, like...
That's it.
Other than that, what's the point, Right.
You shouldn't tell me what to do with my personal beliefs, my personal behaviors.
My vices.
My
We were
opinions.
joking about vices earlier today.
Right.
Like, if I want to drink coffee, I want to drink coffee.
If I'm going to smoke crack, I'm going to smoke crack.
Why do you have to bug me
Why
about
does that?
it?
How does that affect you at all?
How does it?
It
Which, by the
doesn't.
way, we don't smoke crack. And
I
as a
don't.
PSA, please don't smoke crack.
No.
It's not great for you.
Don't
It's better to
s-
drink coffee.
Don't smoke crack. But if you do, I don't think you should go to prison for it.
No,
because
I don't
that's
think
gonna.
so either.
That's already a person who's struggling with crack.
Yeah,
And then now
I'd
you're going to
rather
make their
have
life
people have
worse.
treatment.
Come on. Anyway, that's way off topic.
I know, way off topic, but like, don't smoke crack. The more you know.
Oh god, that's probably our best PSA.
That's our best
yet.
PSA
Yeah.
to date.
If you had
Nailed
just
it.
started making the hand motion,
Yeah.
I would have been able to sing it with you.
Yeah. Next time we'll do it.
We'll do it. We always do PSAs for every show. So silly. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and transition into what's bringing Jaimie here today? So one of my questions...
I don't think you even noticed you had that pun there.
That.
You didn't even do that.
Sure you didn't.
So tell us about what you do
So what
and
do you
why.
do? Who are you?
So, what I spend most of my time doing is I am a cultural competency and diversity and inclusion educational and training consultant. And I've worked very hard to kind of narrow it down to something as bite-sized as that is.
There's a lot to take on, isn't
Really,
there?
because by the third or fourth word, I'm like, I have no idea what she's talking about.
So,
Does not compute.
Yeah.
Go on.
So what does that mean?
And for me, that work of education and consulting focuses on trans and LGBTQIA plus acceptance and equality. Largely, my conversations are about general cultural competency, and then it narrows in further, I would say, on workplace equality. What does diversity in action look like in the workplace? Mm-hmm. So I spend about a third of my time working with corporations of different sizes, with their HR departments, and with about a third with educational institutions. Sometimes this might be school districts, discussing policy development and implementation. Usually it's with higher education, colleges and universities, and then about a third with healthcare.
Interesting.
And then everything else is that remaining.
And so people hire you on to be that kind of consultant?
Right. Wow. So I'm actually not a not-for-profit, which makes me a little different. I'm an LLC, which is basically a for-profit company, but with a difference. So my business is organized as a social enterprise. So for financial and organizational sustainability after 3 years, hopefully, I'll be able to put food on the table and maintain a 40% ratio of paid gigs and 60% pro bono.
That's cool.
And that's my give back to the community.
Yeah.
So it's still pretty much a type of nonprofit to some degree, but you
give
just have
back
to
in a
make
way.
money somehow and live.
Yeah. Yeah.
Function.
You need money to buy food.
Well, honestly, the only
Shelter.
difference I think between the nonprofits is they often are applying for grants, right, and like trying to get paid through that way. So and I think there's all these extra specifications to get that nonprofit.
Yeah. But we're not going to go into that.
We're not going to go into that. That's not what the show's about. Okay.
So what are some of the topics about transgender and people that you end up discussing at these educational venues?
So
Words. Josh is not words today.
I know. I'm not words today either, but continue.
I feel tongue-tied today. Yeah, it's just...
What is it?
I don't know.
I started it. Go on.
So about half of my facilitations, I'm presenting, TES, Trans Basics.
Okay.
The Metro Trans Umbrella Group, MTUG, they have something similar called Trans 101, and there are a couple other organizations that do it. So with mine, I use humor quite a bit and evidence-based information to convey to people, kind of some do's and don'ts. Who are trans people? What might be offensive? What are some myths?
What are some myths? Let's go down that path.
Oh,
yeah.
Love myths. Those are fun.
So there's a section in my Trans Basics where I talk about non-implements. So what's a
non-implements?
So this
Like
is the result,
implements, but
non-implements. Well, like compliments, but not.
Okay.
Okay. Important.
So these are the result of.
I already can think of some. Go on.
These are the these are the outcome of good intentions. Mm-hmm. So here are people who want to be affirming to trans people, who want to open up dialogue, but they really just don't know, some of the what's okay, what's not okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So hopefully in this presentation I give them an idea of that, so that they don't have that barrier to future conversations. But some of my very favorite non-implements, let me see. You look so much better than that other trans woman who transitioned, because life is a beauty contest and we should all be judged by, our
by
scale
some stranger.
1 to 10 by complete strangers.
Yeah.
and not by the content of our character.
Yeah.
You ask too much.
Yeah. You go too far. Jaimie.
I know. I know.
I the one I thought of was, you look good you actually can pass, maybe, right? Like, you can totally pass.
I bet that's a common one. Yeah.
So that's actually number 4 on my list.
That's 4, okay.
Right?
That's
right? I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I've heard that one a lot.
You look really good for a dude. A poor trans person, a trans woman is saying, I'm
not a dude. Yeah. That's probably why.
The woman part would, clue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another one might be, you trans people are just so sexy. And I'm still just a little put off when I hear it. Mm-hmm. And I know it's meant to be affirmational, but it just comes off, trans people are so sexy. It just comes off as so creepy.
It does. Like, I don't think most people, no matter what trans you are or cisgender or whatever, if you come up to them and say, your people are so sexy, it's just
like,
off-putting.
It's like, what do you mean your people?
What do you mean you people?
I think anytime you say something that starts that way, like your people,
like, why don't you just say I'm pretty?
Or I don't mean to be judgmental. I don't mean to be racist. If you ever start your sentence with I don't mean to be,
you probably shouldn't finish it.
Be that way. It's like I've done this in session all the time. I was
like,
stop right there. You're about to say something terrible, and I'm going to save you from it.
Let me save you from yourself there.
I know. Yeah. Well, that is my job, to save people from themselves. A little bit.
Oops. Ooh, you keep smacking the mic.
No, this was only the first time, right?
No, but go on.
More non-pliments, please.
So some,
or at least one more. Your favorite.
It's a tie.
It's a tie. Okay, let's hear what those are.
One's a non-pliment, one is not. So the non-pliment would be, there are so many to choose from.
No rush.
Yeah, I know the sound of the dead air is oppressive.
Like 1,
people 2, love that on the radio.
3.
They totally do.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
No, I'm just messing with you.
One.
It made me laugh. That's all that matters.
Well, maybe we should go into like the reason this is important. So like,
so why do you think people are genuine when they're talking about when they're saying those things?
I do actually, and
they think they're like giving you brownie points.
No, I don't think people have any bad intention, like you were saying.
Yeah, these are the result of good intentions. So saying that I think you. Oh, that's my favorite. You almost look real.
Like you're fake.
That's my very favorite. That's the one I meant to say.
Favorite one.
Alternatively, you're unreal. You're not. Yeah. You're fake.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is a result of people just not knowing how to I don't know what to do with my hands. You know, like what am I supposed to go here and there? Like should I? Like people sometimes just if you haven't talked to people, if you haven't gotten comfortable, it's like what do you say? So you're trying to be nice. But it's good to just talk to people. So, like, how do you help people kind of work through some of these non-pliments and get more comfortable?
Sure. So I'll say them, and I think that puts people at ease hearing a trans person in a situation that's safe and comfortable for all parties. To say these words and then kind of break it down, deconstruct it just a little bit with humor. So that one, my favorite, and I can't imagine I couldn't think of it for a second. You almost look real. I like to approach that one by saying, so if it's me hearing it, here are possible reactions that are in my head that I usually don't say out loud, but I guess I'm going to do it right here on this podcast.
That sounds great.
Go for it.
Go for it.
So there's several. Some that I'll say out loud, and this one that I don't usually, it is, well, that is really great to hear that you think I almost look real, because you have no idea how long it takes to get this human skin over my reptilian flesh every frickin' morning.
That is a lot of work.
And so I find it very gratifying that you would say that. And now I'm going to have to eat you as my people on the show V, the documentary V, have always done.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Well, you should definitely say that.
You should. I think it would be a great way to break the ice and to kind of just say, look, that's not cool.
And you're threatening to eat somebody. So
I know. I love
that goes over with most people. Well,
Does it go over well?
Not at all.
No.
But I love it.
I was about to be shocked if that were true.
Yeah. Well,
I think it depends on the person. Some people like to be eaten. You're gross.
No, that's what she said.
No, he's right. I do. All right, more things that are important. So you mentioned that you talk about genitalia a lot.
Yeah, you said that people always ask about genitalia.
Yeah.
What are they asking? Like we were talking about this a little bit before, and I said, it seems to me people are just curious because really trans people are the only people who can have modified genitalia. So I think that creates a curiosity. They're like, okay, so what happens down there?
Well, and knowing that fact that a lot of trans people, may have had surgical modifications, it kind of leads into the fact that those who've known trans folk before or find out about someone's trans status, so they can see very publicly the changes, and that's a more public and visual signal that there are other changes that they don't see. As long as I'm wearing my skirt or my pants, they
Then
don't
you can't
actually
see 'em,
know.
Yeah.
But some of the questions really are just about things that they don't understand. Here's a question: how do trans people have sex?
Okay.
Oh.
And the answer is in every single possible way you might imagine, which makes them not that much different than any cisgender person, any person who's not trans.
They have sex like everyone else.
My guess is hopefully more creative.
But
But that's what I want for all of my clients.
And I got that from that statement. I did.
Yes.
I would hope, answers to how do people have sex, trans people have sex might be well and often.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
They
I
do
think-
it often.
I think people,
Like most
because
people.
with that, like a lot of people think of sex as it can only be penis and vagina intercourse and nothing else counts as sex. But like that leaves out that whole group of LGBTQIA people that some don't prefer that style of sex.
Well,
There
some
can
don't
be-
match up too.
Well,
So if
whatever.
you're a gay couple,
So what can sex be? It can be oral sex. It can be fingering. It can be just stimulating a clitoris or just stimulating a penis. It can be whole body. So like that's just in the genital
Go on.
region. Like it can be your whole body. I know people who
can you
orgasm.
be your nose?
Yes, actually. Oh, yes. I used to work at a sex store, and how
Nose.
we tested the vibrators was putting them on the end of our nose, and that's how you can tell how intense it'll be on your clitoris. So it's a fun way to explore sex toys.
I do it all the time to check how intense it'll be on my clitoris.
But the big, like, one of the rules is just stimulate nerve endings in a way that's pleasurable for both parties.
Right.
That's it.
That's sex.
And so as long as you're stimulating them in fun and enjoyable ways,
me?
you're doing a great job. I don't know. It could be you. It could be me.
I have do not disturb on. Go away phone.
Go away, phones.
Is your phone down here?
My phone's right there.
Oh, it's right there.
It's right
I
there,
see.
live streaming.
I don't know if it was yours.
I don't know. Who knows? But
I heard it
continue.
bang. Go
So
on, sorry.
the answer is any way possible.
Any way possible. Or I'll say, trans people have sex the same way that cisgender and heterosexual people do. When you remember that everyone, orgasms happen between these,
Yeah.
not between the knees.
Although
So-
they can be enjoyed between the knees too.
But the orgasm, the sensory
I know.
input,
It's all up here.
This is
Everything
where,
comes
this is where we
here.
get it.
Yeah. I think people are sometimes, they think that the mind is separate from the body. I know that came from psychology, which is totally crazy. Your mind and your body are completely connected.
They're all the same.
And what I found is when
It's a
people
part of the
aren't
body.
like connected to their body and they're kind of like in their own heads, even if you were like magical when it comes to how you use your fingers, they won't feel it. They will not feel it. It'll almost be numb because this, like you said,
Yeah.
is not involved. They
Yeah,
don't
you can't be
notice.
busy doing algebra.
Yeah.
and be expected to
definitely not
perform.
algebra.
No. College algebra.
So that's our next PSA. Don't do algebra while you're trying to have sex unless you're turned on by algebra.
I always make that mistake.
That should be a bumper sticker. I think that is such an important piece of knowledge that
I
really
think
should be out there
so.
more.
Especially if you're trying to deal with like logarithms. You just don't want to
yeah,
touch
I
it.
agree. That
No.
would just be too difficult.
No.
When having sex, just say no to calculus.
Focus on your own log, not on a theoretical one.
Oh, for all our math
That's
buffs.
a math
Woo!
joke of sorts.
I hope you liked it, math
Yeah.
people.
We have one math fan, I'm sure.
vulva, not vectors.
I love this.
I love it.
Vulva, that's going to be in the blog.
Vulva, not vectors. There we go. Yeah.
So we should probably ask more about what you do. But we're having fun. We do a lot of bunny trails.
Yeah.
I hope you noticed that's a part of the show.
So what are some other educational topics you cover? Yeah, people always ask about genitalia.
But what are the
other
things?
What do you think is the most important thing that somebody should learn about if they don't know a lot about transgendered people?
Some of this may sound so intuitive that it shouldn't have to be said or would need to be said, but it kind of does.
Yeah.
Respect pronouns.
Yeah.
If the person you're talking to or might want to address is someone that you knew before their transition, there are a couple different strategies for finding out, how they want to be addressed, or if there's been a name change. Some people early in their transition might go through more than one name, as they're trying to work through the process of figuring out what they want to be called by for the rest of their life.
That's a big decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's how you identify yourself.
I still don't know what to call myself.
We're just going to keep calling you Josh, honey.
Fine.
Okay.
I was thinking like Alexander the Great or something, but I heard that's taken.
So, ask what they would like to be called.
Bunny trail.
Yeah, and there are ways to do it that are less obtrusive and make fewer assumptions, which and assumptions might cause offense. So open it and questions that one could ask. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how your name is spelled, so I'm not stating what I think your name might be or how it should be spelled. Right. And instead I'm opening that up for the person
That's a smart way of
to
asking
define
it.
their identity, to describe their identity.
Yeah.
Also kind of leading by example. Hi, my name is Jaimie Hilemann. I use she, her pronouns. So by doing that, a cisgender person doing that, they're kind of recognizing that importance of getting pronouns right, because it really does matter. And not just to trans people. I've never met a cis person that really liked someone consistently getting their pronouns wrong.
No, I did not. I didn't like that. No.
Yeah.
I've had it.
Well, yeah, because
I had long hair when I was a young man.
Uh-huh.
So if you have long hair, you may every once in a while get, "Thanks, young lady."
Oh, those young bucks with their long hair.
Yep. But I was dressed grunge too, so I was like,
they just, and that's the thing. So you don't always know if they're doing that on purpose or if they really think you look like a female.
Oh, I'm sure I was beautiful, but anyway.
Oh, that's cute.
We were all beautiful when we were young.
Yeah, I know, right? Those were the days.
What else do you think is important for people to know? About trans.
To ratchet down assumptions and expectations. Not all trans people undergo medical transition. Of the 4 components of transition: medical, legal, social, psychotherapeutic. Some do all. Most don't. So assumptions about surgeries or procedures that someone might have had, just kind of dial those expectations, those assumptions back, and let someone share what they're comfortable with sharing.
Right.
I would definitely want to share that.
Yeah. People are very invasive. It sounds like with trans people. Like nobody ever asked me about my penis ever, in general. But I'm assuming as a trans person, you get asked that a lot more than I do.
So for trans people, as I was mentioning earlier, how visible our transitions are, because we can look like very different people to people who knew us before. So what comes with that is, this assumption that, the things that aren't visible, that they can't see, have also changed. And people are, like, as you said, people are curious. Yeah. But some questions I might ask back is, is this information that you need to know concerning the relationship you have with this person? Right.
Is this a stranger you're talking to, for example?
Yeah, someone next to you in line at the grocery store can probably successfully put their groceries up on the belt and pay for them without knowing what your genitalia have been up to lately.
I love that. Yeah, I think they can.
Yep, we love the use of humor. I think humor is a great way of like connecting people to information. So suddenly you're kind of like, oh, I see that differently. That makes no sense. Why do you need to know about my genitalia to do groceries?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you reverse it,
Perfect.
I mean, and you were standing in line and someone just said, so what has your vagina been up to lately? You know
what? I would be okay with you guys asking me that.
No, you wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't.
You don't even like it when I ask it.
Don't. I'm totally messing with you.
I have been asked, virtually that same question, and I have actually said, oh, well, thank you for asking. So I took her out for a walk this morning, and later I've got a major grooming session planned.
There was an SNL skit long ago where these people went to a nude beach, and the guy's like freaked out, and he's saying, oh my God, what are they going to say? He's like, it's not going to be that big of a deal. They're just going to be people. And so basically his biggest fear comes true because he goes out, and they're like, hey, how's your penis? And they're like, what? Why are you talking? He's like, what? Oh, yours is a pretty small penis. So like everything you would have worried about is what they talk about, like humans. And I loved it because I think that's probably an example of like the experience of somebody asking about your genitals and they're like, I don't even know you. Are you sure you?
And that's the weird thing is like people are normally very like awkward about talking about sex and those intimate things. Like you're saying, he's going on the beach and he fears that people are going to be like, hey, what's up with your penis? People generally don't. So it has to be tough to be in that situation where people are on a regular basis asking about that. Like, I don't know how often it comes up. Like, do you get it once a month? Or
what would be the
couple times a year? Like how common is that?
Josh always has the wildest questions, to be fair.
Like, I don't know how common
no
it is.
It's okay.
Well, I feel obligated to point out this bit of info that I picked up somewhere along my life, and that's that even before you get to that point where ostensibly these men on the beach are asking each other questions. It should probably first be noted that that fear of another man asking about a man's penis and has it been taken for a walk lately or what have you, not so much, because most men would rather talk about their own penises.
Oh, well, men do love their penises. They're a very strong part of their human
I'm a big
nature.
fan.
You're a big fan.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
I've noticed this in my private practice, actually. Like, if ever they have any issue with their penis, it is, like, a huge problem. Like, it's not just like, okay, let's go to the doctor, let's go to therapy. There is a huge transition to even like accept that they may be having a problem, to eventually talk to their partner about it, to maybe get help. And if the help doesn't work right away, they freak out. Like Viagra doesn't work for every person.
If you just ignore a problem, then it doesn't exist.
Well, that is how men deal with problems.
Like, don't you understand that?
Cisgender males.
It works for me.
It that way.
And that's why in all of
in
world
denial
history,
since 1982.
In all of world history, there's never been a problem.
Nope, no problems at all.
Well, that's true. We just look the other
here.
way and everything's fine. No, that's how to live your life. No, please don't live your life that way, guys. Come on. Okay, so then you're not just working with trans issues. You're also working with the others. So LGBTQIA.
And plus? What's plus?
What's plus? Oh, yeah, that'd be interesting.
They keep adding stuff at the end, but is that kind of an all-inclusive?
Well, we should also identify the LGBTQIA.
L,
Go on.
lesbian, gay,
lesbian,
bi,
LG, gay,
trans.
bi, trans.
What is it? Q?
Q.
Queer.
Or questioning.
Queer
is
questioning.
I intersex, asexual, and then what's
or,
plus?
Or asexual or agender.
Agender, okay.
And the plus holds space for any identities that aren't explicitly listed in the initialism of LGBTQIA.
Yeah. So it's an attempt to be very inclusive.
It's an inclusive
it's a symbol
plus.
of inclusiveness, yes.
Well, it literally is, because you're literally adding stuff.
It's like we are willing to add everyone. We
well,
want everybody
don't
to
worry.
feel safe to be
You're
who they
welcome
are.
to be under the umbrella.
The intent of inclusion made manifest. That's the plus.
It
works.
So what kinds of work do you do with the other letters?
The other letters, people. They're called people,
right?
Angela.
I know they're people.
You're always calling
Soylent
people
Green
letters.
is
It's
people.
so rude. Soylent Green. We're not eating them, Angela.
I know. Well, we did talk about eating people earlier, didn't we? Right? The
No.
lizard.
No.
And full circle.
Oh. It's too early to go full circle. We're only at a half hour. Anyway.
But people do talk about each other with letters. You know,
Yeah.
she's a real B, he's a real D.
Oh, I just say dick.
He's a real AH.
AH?
She's a real see you next Tuesday, right? That's the ones that people use.
Yeah.
And?
So, for me, it's partly because...
Let's not spell that, Angela. It's PG or G.
I'm trying to be PG.
You spelled see you in
We were going to
next
stop
Tuesday.
cutting Jaimie off.
I'm cutting you off.
Sorry,
Anyway.
I hope we're okay with you.
No.
So, it's twofold for me why I do both trans and LGBTQIA advocacy and education in my professional work.
Mm-hmm.
One, even though the T is separate, so we're talking about gender identity and not sexual orientation, attraction orientation. When it comes to inclusion in the workplace, it's very closely tied to people's understanding because most people don't make that distinction. So it's actually easier to talk about trans issues within the context of greater LGBTQ issues when I'm working with, say, HR execs, people who are key stakeholders in making a workplace more inclusive. And secondly, it's also because it's almost impossible to separate the T from the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. Only 33% of trans people self-describe as heterosexual. So the remaining 67% identify, as long as with the T, but also with another letter.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a woman who is a trans person, and also happens to be a lesbian. So I've got 2 letters.
I see.
Sounds
So it's
good.
important to kind of cover all of it. Something
Because they're part of all those other groups a lot of times.
Yeah,
Right.
And they all need inclusion. One thing you mentioned is like things in the workplace. I'm kind of curious what things would be helpful. Like if ever there's employers listening or people who want their workplace to be more inclusionary, like what are things that we can do in the workplace to make it a more comfortable place for everyone?
Sure. So a business or an institution can have a non-discrimination policy for both sexual orientation and gender identity. They can have counseling for, say, management and workmates available, or bring an educator, a competent educator from outside to work with employees when, say, they have a transitioning employee. Having gender-neutral and safe bathroom space. And that's something that's not just important to a trans person who maybe is kind of middle transition, not comfortable using either one of the binary bathrooms. But that's a plus for a whole lot of other people, too. People with disability would appreciate, a gender-neutral single stall.
I think most people would.
Yeah.
I don't like sharing a bathroom.
Yeah. And like
with anybody.
and
I like it when I go to a place like I go over here and there's a bathroom and there's one bathroom. You go in, you're the only
everybody
person
gets
in
their
there.
own stall. I don't know why that was such a big deal, And actually, I hate being in the women's line for the restrooms. I would much rather go to a gender-neutral stall where everybody's going to the same place, and sometimes it's quick and sometimes it's slow, but you all have to wait the same amount.
So, yeah.
I'm not bitter.
Having that space available is actually of use to a lot of people, not just a trans employee or coworker or customer or client. So all of those things, and a lot of terminology that could be exclusionary for trans folk, because it's very gendered. It isn't always necessary. Mailman. Well, about 40% of male men are actually
Male women.
I call them male persons.
So
I call a male lady.
I've done that for
male
years.
person,
The
which
male
is-
person.
We have a woman who delivers our mail.
Yeah.
That's kind
Whatever.
of humorous. Male person.
The male person.
Male.
I've done it for a very long time.
Hello, male sentience.
Male person.
Or
Male sentience.
carrier. The male carrier.
Male carriers, I
carrier?
think, what they commonly
Because
use.
I was thinking, like, I've had a female, I've had all kinds of male people, and so, like, it could be a male person.
Well, that goes back to a long
Salesperson.
That goes back to the long history where really a lot of women didn't work in that era. Back
Yeah,
in the 40s
I
and
guess so,
50s.
I
So,
guess
it,
so.
it was a lot of times a male man. So, But now, no. A lot of the women work in the male service.
Well, and a lot of like a lot of people work in the military, a lot of people work all over the place. So it's just, I don't know, inclusionary person.
and that kind of reinforces the point, removing needlessly gendered language. It doesn't just benefit trans people, but also benefits us all, with the idea of gender equality.
Thinking of thinking of growing up, like if you think, oh, you can only be a man if you work in the male, the more that we remove that gender stigma, I think the easier it is for people to feel like, oh, I can be represented in this group. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, only a man could be a policeman. Well, a woman can certainly also be a police officer.
Yeah, police officer. See, look at all that.
It works.
So, do you mind if we ask a little bit about your own personal transition? Is that an okay? Okay.
I wanted to actually ask about.
Oh, he already took it over.
So, history. You mentioned you talk about history. I'm a big fan of history. I like hearing about history. What are some of the history topics that you discuss?
So sometimes people will counsel against acceptance or recognition for trans people, will argue against the medical necessity of, say, transition-related healthcare. And one of those claims is that, this is experimental. We don't know anything about this. We shouldn't let these people do these things. But there's actually, almost 100 years of history about, looking at trans people and listening to trans people. Almost 100 years of research and study, unfortunately, which got broken up, derailed by World War II, and it began again in the late 50s, and led to what we have today, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health and their standards of care.
That's WPATH.
That's WPATH.
WPATH.
I'm an associate member. I'm proud to be able to work with them, and so a few things come out of that I think are useful to share with folks in terms of history. Trans people are not mentally ill just for being transgender. And we've seen the evolution of that throughout history, throughout the American Psychiatric Associations.
Was it a diagnosis at one point?
Changes in diagnosis
in
the DSM. And in 2013, the DSM-5 confirmed that it is not pathology.
Wait, they didn't take it out till then? 2013, or was it just
the gender dysphoria diagnosis of the DSM-5 made it clearly not pathology. Before that, the diagnosis had been gender identity disorder. So a disorder
something
is
that
pathology.
Treated. Something that can be fixed.
Historically, sex has always been kind of demonized in the DSM. Just to put that out there, only recently have we started to allow fetishes. So now fetishes, the only thing that makes it more of a pathology is if it's non-consensual or if it is causing severe harm to the individual person, which I think is important because before people were like, oh no, what are people doing spanking each other in rooms?
They're not
there's
like
something
us,
wrong
so
with
there
them.
must be something wrong with them.
And the other thing people used to say is if they're not having sex in the way that I'm having sex, then there must be something wrong with them, which is not fair. So that makes sense that it takes a while for, I guess, even the psychology to come to the future.
Welcome to modern times.
Words!
They're woke.
They woke. Oh, I love that. You're so silly.
Although, if we allow people to spank each other, it's a slippery slope. That's almost the same as saying, yes, I welcome the Martian communist invasion.
Oh, no.
Or snuff films.
Yeah,
Yep.
but that's,
Exactly.
Guys, so that is called a leap in logic.
Yeah.
So just because...
Whoa, don't use these crazy medical terms, Angela.
A leap away from logic.
No, but that's the point. So people read some research and then they say, okay, because of this, then therefore this. And I'm wanting people to know that phrase because a lot of leaps in logic are created based on
correlation.
Or correlations. And actually, correlation does not equal causation. In fact, good
Does not
research
indicate
is
it at
always
all.
changing, growing, evolving. We're learning more. So if you read one thing today, it may be different tomorrow because that's the nature of good research. So no, you can't definitively say one thing just because of another thing.
One of my favorite such examples of that.
That was a long bunny trail.
I know, I'm sorry. Go on, continue. She'll bring it full circle.
Of that illogic are that, well, trans and LGBT people can't reproduce. So that tells us that they're an aberration. that they're not normal. Well, first off, who said we can't? Who
told you couldn't do that?
Hundreds of lesbian and gay and bi and trans friends in all kinds of relationships who create
children,
family, with children in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
And the one thing that they all have in common is that creating family on the basis of love is always a good and beautiful thing. And LGBT folk are as capable of that as any other. So first off, yes, we can reproduce and have families.
Huh?
Anyway.
Go on.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think it sounded like it exploded near a house. We're hoping everything's okay. But why Josh is a little freaked out as we
North
did just hear
Korea. I think
so far it's not a bomb.
Kim Jong-un is invading St. Louis. I knew it.
Why St. Louis? People always think you're going to get invaded. Who cares about St. Louis? But anyhow.
I do, Angela. I do.
Because if you can invade there, in St. Louis, in the middle of the country, if you can invade there, you can invade anywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
So
we're pretty far
we're pretty
inland.
barricaded in, I guess. So.
Yeah.
Anyhow, back to what you were saying.
What were we talking about?
Back on track.
Yeah, trans and gay people not only do have families, but it's the most normal thing in the world to want to create family and to want to have children for those people who want to.
Yeah.
So this idea that only if people have families in the nuclear family way, the way that I was raised, the way that I think it's supposed to be is the only normal way, even though the nuclear family has existed for less than a century.
And to put some research into that perspective, we've looked at families now. We have data now that shows that families that are raised by LGBTQ parents versus your traditional cisgender parents, there is no difference. And to some degree, in some of those families, there might be a little bit better outcomes because there's more openness, more acceptance for who you are. So if they have any differences growing up, then they feel more accepted to come out and safe. Sorry,
that
guys.
is your phone.
That is my phone. I will turn it off. You guys keep talking, but I will close that.
So those are some challenges that have been present historically.
I knew it was her phone.
And those are some responses. And I love that Angela, used some facts and
she loves
evidence-based
facts.
I love facts.
I'm Angela.
They're so important.
Let's use reality to measure everything.
I know, right? That would be even worse than switching to the metric system.
It would be so much easier.
Well, actually,
everything's divisible by 10.
Exactly.
I turned it all down, guys. Sorry about that.
You don't have to tell me. And it makes sense, too. Yeah.
Well, and I want to be fair. So my philosophy in life is that you need 3 things to be happy.
What?
Facts, empathy, and transparency.
Wait,
if you have those 3 things...
I think you need money and
well,
food.
Sure, okay, there's
and
the Maslow's
sex.
hierarchy of needs. But what I'm saying is that if we can teach people deep empathy and acceptance for others, and we can teach them facts, then this is the crazy part. People can make good decisions for themselves.
You go too far, Angela.
I know!
Next thing you know, democracy will be breaking out everywhere. And what then? What then?
I don't know. It's not working too well for us, so...
No, but it's true, and I see it with the children that are being raised. When we're raising a daughter with this concept in mind.
What concept?
Empathy,
yeah.
And it's funny. So I have a deaf mother, and so I learned a lot about facial expressions and cues. And one of the first ways to teach empathy is just by showing your face and what experience is happening as if they do something.
They hurt
so
you,
for example, if she throws something at us, we get right in her face and we're like, ouch.
Instead of
that
yelling
hurts.
at her.
We're not yelling at her, but we're showing her the experience
that
physically,
she has affected us.
That she's affected us. And now she's this is almost 3-year-old kid, and she's like,
it's okay.
I'm sorry.
She apologizes. She hugs. She says thank you.
She's the happiest
awesome.
kid in her daycare. Yeah. I'm telling you guys, this
I don't know if
works.
you know this, but we're pretty awesome parents.
No!
It's pretty much what Angela's saying.
No, I'm saying that, instead of,
right, you're teaching empathy.
Stop trying to control your children. Start teaching them to be good people themselves.
Right. Yeah.
Praxis over theory?
I think so.
I don't know what that means. What's praxis?
Tell us what you mean.
What's praxis?
What do you think by that?
The actual doing of something.
Oh,
you know,
practice.
The practice of something rather than
I don't
saying-
hear words.
Oh, I thought I think he heard praxis, like
Yeah.
the praxis test.
That's
Yeah,
what I thought
and
you were
that's-
talking about.
That's what I had. You know,
You're like taking an exam.
do
Yeah,
as I
got
do
it.
and not
Got
as I
it.
say.
Got it,
Gotcha. Yep.
There
yep,
we
yep.
go.
There you go. So anyhow, I did want. Is it okay if I ask the question?
for
then?
it,
Like
yeah.
I am curious about.
I'll allow it. Thank you for asking your husband for permission.
Because I tried to ask a question, you totally sent it somewhere else. Is it okay if I ask about what your transition process was like?
Sure.
Okay. What was it like? Well, I'm asking because if she doesn't want to talk about it, that's
Sure.
fine too.
I know.
So, like a lot of people, mine took several years.
Mm-hmm.
Going from that stage of awareness. You know? So for me, that moment when I knew that I was trans, that I was 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
But I obviously didn't have the word trans because I assure you, in 1972 in Union County, Illinois, the word transgender did not exist.
No.
But that doesn't mean that trans people couldn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was aware of that disconnect in my life, but I had no idea what to do about it, and I was steadfastly against it. I assure you, if it could have been denied away or prayed
If you
away,
could change it, you would.
I
Yeah.
would have done it. I
Yeah.
absolutely would have
Which
done
is
it.
one of those arguments people say of like, what, you know, like, yeah, this is a choice for you. These people, like, why? Why would you choose
To have a harder life.
to have a harder life?
Yeah.
Well, that's very logical.
Yeah.
But not everybody uses logic. We've already covered
So
that.
go on.
Continue with
So
your
you were
story.
5 when you realized you were trans. You didn't know the word yet, but
So that's something that I carried throughout my life, and I reached that point that most of us do, where, so in addition to awareness and acceptance, you know, well, this is who I am. This is not a mental illness. I'm not possessed by a demon.
oh, good to know.
You know,
Which, by the way,
this
that's
is who
not
I
a
am.
diagnosis. Possessed by a demon does not exist in
Wait.
DSM.
My doctor has to answer for something.
So I reached that point where, you know, moving from
Angela's broken
awareness,
now.
acceptance to action, and I began my
Okay.
transition.
Yeah.
And at first, it was reaching out for a therapist who was culturally competent and had experience with trans issues,
good.
because you might think that a lot of people with social work and psychiatric training would be familiar with trans experiences
No.
and how to work with trans folk when it comes to gender identity. That's just not the case.
No, it's not. And
It's
they're not.
not.
And the same is true of any sexuality issues and being inclusive with LGBTQIA.
So if somebody were wanting to find
plus.
a therapist who were inclusive and understanding of that, would they want to look for a sex therapist specifically? Or is there
You
certain...
could. We tend to be a little more inclusive, but there's other places to find them, right?
I actually know several sex therapists who I would recommend as being
Yeah.
trans culturally competent and would work with trans folk when it comes to identity, you know, when they're just starting that part of their journey.
It's a part of our training. That's why.
Sure.
Continue.
I would also advise folks to look at trans community resources and for referrals there. So the Metro Trans Umbrella Group of St. Louis, MTUG, as well as my own organization, TES,
Yeah.
Trans Education Service. We both have links to resources on our page, and I've put together as an extensive list as I can. And when it comes to therapists and clinicians, you know, these are all people who have been vetted and recommended as trans and LGBT culturally competent. So that makes a big difference. And I was lucky. I had the right therapist for me.
That's good.
And I was able to start that journey. And, you know, one of the smallest parts of it is clothing and outward appearance. At the time, and I've talked to a whole lot of other people, and this is particularly something of issue for trans women, because in our society, women are always on stage. Women are always judged
Yeah.
by their appearance more
Always
than
objectified to some
yeah.
degree.
And so, you know, early in transition, there's this enormous lack of self-confidence about appearance. And so there's a lot of conversation about it. But, you know, as one goes further in the other aspects of transition, maybe it's medical, legal, psychotherapeutic, social, just knowing that you're comfortable with who you are in your own skin. Well, I am a woman, so this t-shirt I'm wearing, it's a woman's t-shirt.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't. You know, maybe it was unisex, or maybe it's a fitted, you know, close-in, short cap sleeve T-shirt, women's T-shirt. Maybe it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're you and you're wearing it, it's your clothes, and you're a woman, then it's a woman's clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And having that attitude is probably the most important piece of transition, really, over any medical procedure or anything else, because that means you can walk through the world as yourself, no matter what you're doing or where you're going. Mm-hmm. And I would say that's key.
That's one of the biggest parts of being comfortable with who you are, is accepting that you are a woman. And
that your gender identity, I don't want to leave out my trans siblings who are non-binary, or my trans brethren, but that your gender identity is yours.
Specific, you personally, yeah.
Right.
That your gender is yours, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so...
Is that a big part of what happens in the therapeutic process? You were talking about going to therapy is...
Yeah. You know, integrating, you know, one's own gender identity instead of something external, something to be fought. You know, that is indeed who one is, and to be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So of the four main pieces of transition, that's why psychotherapeutic is one, and why it's important.
Yeah.
Because once you've got that, you can kind of manage all the rest. Once I became comfortable in my own skin, I spent a whole lot less time worrying about my makeup. I wore a lot less makeup because I realized what a great thing it was to get ready for work and not have to spend that extra 10 minutes or 15 minutes on my face. You know, I could just do what I felt like I had to, just to look professional.
You don't feel like you have to go full.
The whole, right, exactly.
Yeah.
You don't have to look like you're going to the prom every day.
Oh, God, the hair.
The hair?
It has to be at least 3 inches high, I hear.
I had
prom ready.
I had a flashback to 1983.
Yeah.
And Aquanet, all of the Aquanets.
All that,
I still have a can of
all
that
that
in
ozone
my
is
bathroom.
dead. It's yeah.
Well, and I think that's important for everybody too. That, like, you know, obviously as a therapist, I'm always trying to encourage people to feel confident in themselves. But I think a lot of people struggle with that sense of self-identity and feeling confident in yourself.
Who am I?
Well, and you know, I think that's a part of everyone's life journey. Is how do I get comfortable in my skin? How do I identify in a way that feels respectful and comfortable to me?
I think it's a struggle for a lot of adults.
Yeah, adulting
or
and
teens.
feelings. People hate feelings.
I'm an adult.
Were there any particular challenges in your transition process that, like, I mean, were your family comfortable with it, or were your friends, or did you have any struggle along the way?
So I put off coming out to my parents longer than I really needed to. I was afraid. And I wasn't necessarily afraid that they wouldn't love me anymore. I was afraid that they wouldn't know how to love me in the way that they had.
Oh.
And I made
it would change somehow.
Yeah. And also I didn't want to cause them shame, humiliation, or hurt. That they had somehow failed, that, you know, they had somehow made a mistake. So those were things I worried a lot about.
That's a lot to hold on to.
That's a lot, yeah. How did they respond? Were they supportive?
They were. They absolutely astonished me.
Yeah, that's cool.
It didn't go at all like how I'd planned. At all.
No.
Yeah.
Everything you worried about, none of it.
It was none of that.
Yeah.
No.
Nothing. Huh. That's cool.
That's special.
Well, if only every trans person had that much luck
that
when it comes to their parents and family, yeah.
I'm very grateful.
It'd be a lot easier, yeah.
I'm very grateful. Yeah. And I got to keep
awesome.
my family. A lot of people don't.
Yeah. There's I don't know the exact number on the research, but there is a high number of homeless trans persons because not every family is accepting. And so, I mean, part of why we need to educate, one thing I love that you said is a big part of this is education, is teaching people, giving them facts. We've said this. But with facts and a deep amount of empathy for others, I think people can learn to accept some of these things and not see it as this big failure. There's something wrong with the person, but that it's just some people turn out to be trans.
Some people are different than you.
Some people turn out to be lesbian.
Yeah.
Some people, and it's okay.
0.7%. There are
0.7%.
1.4 million trans folk in the United States. You mentioned homelessness. That is a real issue when it comes to youth. There are about 200,000 homeless youth, you know, so that's under 18 in the United States.
That's a lot.
And 80,000 of them are LGBT. So that's a really high
That's
percentage.
a high percentage for the actual population.
And half of those kids, so that would be what? That'd be 40,000 out of 200,000. Half of those kids are trans. So there's a lot of familial rejection and rejection to the point where they're actually thrown out of their home.
That's tough.
Yeah, no, it is. It's tough, and we need as a culture to get more comfortable with these issues, so that's not happening. Because I think everybody does deserve a loving home, and whether it's a family of choice or just making families more accepting and loving, I hope that's the goal.
For some,
that is what family values. The phrase "family values." That's what it should be, right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
We
agree.
shouldn't let Trump more and all them control that way. Because they are really ripping it apart in a terrible way. Yeah. But
Okay.
I think it should be about love. I agree. Yeah.
So are there any final points or thoughts that you wanted to share before we close the show?
We're about at the end. We're right at an hour, actually.
Yeah. The important things people should know.
So I've already said where resources might be.
Yeah, and your website, transedservice.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, what can people find out about there?
So they can see the different presentations that I have available. They can see the resource link for medical and psychotherapeutic resources, but lots of others too, and community resources.
That's good.
Such as MTUG support groups. I really want to make sure I mention those. They run peer support groups for different identities within the trans community. So they have the locker room for trans men, FemSpec for trans women, gender expression for non-binary and gender non-conforming folks, and also one for intersex people. So these are important, and it offers up an opportunity for acceptance and community and information for people who may be struggling with where they are. I want to make sure I plug that because that's a very important resource for folks.
Well, and we want people to have the resources.
And then there's also the support group, the Family Room in St. Louis, which is for the partners and family, close friends of trans folk who need their support.
Yeah. And it's probably good educational support for them as well, because they can meet other families who are learning about the same process.
Right. It's affirming and social.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of our show. And of course, I do my plugs. If you want to see a therapist in the St. Louis area, I'm at www.therapistinstlouis.com. And of course, there's our About Sex podcast. And I have my book coming out in January. It's going to be coming out January 28th. I got the date. And so the book is Helping Couples Overcome Infidelity, a therapist's manual. But of course, for all of my books, I write them for both clinicians and clients. So it's very easily readable.
Sounds good.
All right.
Well, this has been the About Sex podcast. Check us out at www.aboutsexpodcast.com. And please leave us a comment or give us a review on iTunes.
Yep.
Thank you
for joining us.
Have a good night, everybody. Bye.
Bye.